In this video, we will code a basic game of craps. In case you're wondering what the game is, it is a dice game with the following rules. So we roll 2 dice, and the sum of the dice is calculated. If the sum is 7 or 11, the player wins if this is rolled on the first roll. If the sum is 2, 3, or 12, the player loses if this is the first roll. Now if the sum is everything else, the sum becomes point. And to win, you continue to roll the dice until you make the point, that is, until you roll the same value again. So if you roll 6, then you keep rolling until you again roll 6. Or if meanwhile you roll 7 over here, then you lose. So either you roll the point first or you roll 7. That's how the game ends. Now there's also some special names if certain sum is reached. So for example, the sum of 2 is called snake eyes, sum of 3 is called tray, sum of 11 is called yo 11, and there's plenty more. So if you're from Las Vegas, I'm sure you know these, but I'm not all that familiar with it. But I wanted to introduce at least some of these because we are going to be using enumerations for those. And these names are used only if it's the first roll. So let's say the player rolls 11 on the first roll, so we will display that the player rolled yo 11. If the player rolled 12, for example, we'll display the boxcars instead of just the sum 12. However, in any other rolls other than the first one, the sum will simply be the number that you roll. So there are 2 ways to win and 2 ways to lose. So here are the examples. So if you roll, let's say 7 on the first roll, the player wins. That's the first example here. Or let's say you roll 6 on the first roll, then that becomes the point. And we will keep rolling. So you can see that the next roll was 9, then 12, then 3, 5, 5 again, and 4. But you have to match the point, which is 6. And at the end, you rolled 6 and you won because you rolled your point before you rolled 7. If you rolled 7, you would lose, as you can see right here. Again, you rolled 5 at first, and that became your point, and then you kept rolling 8, 4, 4, and 3, and then you rolled 7, which is you lost. Or over here on the first roll, if you rolled 1 and 1, you rolled snake eyes and you lose. Alright, so that's the game, and let's code. First, I'm going to create a class that will be responsible for rolling the dice. And we need to randomly generate integers that will be the face values of each die. So I'm going to create a variable that will hold the random values. As you can see, I'm making it private because I want it to be accessed only from within this class. Next thing, we need to be able to assign a value to each of the 2 dice. So I have die 1 and die 2, and we will be getting the value from it and also setting the value for the die. And finally, we need to simulate the roll of the dice. Within it, we will add the values of the both dice together and we will return it. So let's create the method. I'll just call it dice roll. And now we can assign a random value to each of the die. Now obviously, each die can have a value from 1 to 6. And finally, we need to add the 2 values together and return them from the method. So I'll just do it all in a return statement. And we are returning die 1 plus die 2. So that's our roll dice class. And next, let's create a class that will simulate the game. And I'll call that craps game. Alright, first let's create all the necessary variables. As I showed you at the beginning, the game uses some special names for certain conditions. For example, when the sum of the dice is 2, it is said we rolled snake eyes. So let's create these special names and put them into an enumeration. Notice that I assigned integer values to each of them. If we didn't do that, the enum would simply use the default integer starting from 0, so snake eyes would be 0. But we want to specify under which sum these names are invoked. So the sum of 2 gives us snake eyes, sum of 3 gives us tray, and so forth. So next, we can use another enum that will hold the status of the game. And as you can see, there are 3 possible options. Either the player wins or loses or the game continues. Now remember, if the game is not finished after the first roll, then the sum of the dice is used as called point, and the game continues until the player either rolls the sum that equals to the point, in which case he wins, or until he rolls 7, in which case he loses. Okay, next we have a few more variables we need. First, we need to create an object of our roll dice class. So here's my object, and next we need a variable that will initialize our enums. So I have my game status, which is the win, lose, or continue, and I'm assigning the value from it to game status variable, and the same with dice sum, which will be the dice sum variable. As you can see, I'm making all these variables private because I don't want them to be used from outside of this class at all. These are all going to be used only within the class. And finally, I will need 3 integers. One that is used as a counter to count the number of dice rolls, and second that will hold the sum of the roll. And finally, third one that will hold the value of the point. Again, point will have the same value as the sum after the first roll, unless the game ends after the first roll, then there is no point. So here they are, my 3 integers. So let's continue with a method that will evaluate the roll. We will evaluate the sum of the dice and determine what value was rolled, such as 7, snake eyes, etc. And we will determine if the game ends and who wins, or if we continue to keep rolling until we hit the point. Alright, so here is my method. It won't return anything, everything will be set within the method itself. Now the evaluation is going to be a simple switch statement that will evaluate the sum. Since we have the access to the sum because we declared it up here in the class level, we don't have to pass it as an argument. So let's code the switch statement, and within the switch statement we are evaluating the sum. So first, let's code the cases when the player wins, which is if he rolls 7 or 11 on the first roll. So let's do case 7 first. And here, if the player rolls 7, then we can assign the value 7 to our dice sum. Remember, that's a special name, which simply says the word 7 instead of just displaying the number in this case. So dice sum will equal, and we are picking the dice sum dot, and this one is 7. Next thing, we'll set the game status to win, because this is the first roll, so the player wins if he rolls 7. So game status equals game status dot, we choose win. Next, since we are winning on the first roll, we can set the point to 0 because there is no point. And that's it. For this case, we can break out. The next case will be the 11. In this case, the dice sum will have the special meaning that is called the yo 11. The game status will be win again, no point, and we can break out of it. Next, let's go the cases when the player loses, which is when he rolls 2, 3, or 12 on the first roll. So let's start with case 2. And if player rolls 2, then the dice sum will equal snake eyes, and the game status will be set to lose. And again, there is no point because we finished the game after the first roll. And this is going to be the same for cases 3 and 12. So in case 3, we roll tray. In case of 12, we rolled boxcars. And finally, if neither of these cases happen, then the game continues and point is created, and that will be our default. So the game status will be to continue, and the point, remember, after the first roll, if no one wins or loses, the point equals the sum that was rolled. Alright, so next we can code the messages for winning, losing, or continuing rolling the dice.